Hi, I'm Peter Master Livy Cherbulenko, and in this series I explore the typical mistakes of people rated anywhere between 1000 and 2000. This is a first reaction, no engine analysis of a chess.com game played between 1746 versus 1698. Let's start. Alright, so e4, c5, the Sicilian defense, c3, the Alapin variation. The main line usually goes like knight f3 and d4, fighting for the center. c3 is not the main line, but the point is to still fight for the center. But the difference is that this time, after black takes, white wants to take back with a pawn, and thus having two pawns in the center, not just like one. So that's the whole point, to control the center with two pawns. Let's see, g6, there is such a move. The two other main moves would be either d5 or knight f6. So let's say d5, white can takes, d4, cd, cd, and then white has an isolated pawn, but has some, activity, some better development, but long term this pawn might be weak. So it's like a battle between, a weak pawn strategically, right? But at the same time, white has more activity, more dynamics, more development. So there's like this battle between like statics and dynamics. Or black would play knight f6, and then let's say e5, knight d5, white can play d4, takes, and white could eventually take either with a queen or with a pawn, again with interesting play. But these are the two main moves, d5 and knight f6. g6 is also an interesting move. Let's see, d4, alright, takes, queen takes. Another move would be to take with the pawn, have a two pawn center, and then just like develop like knight c3, knight f3, bishop e2, bishop e3 with normal play. So cd would have been I think more typical. But okay, queen d4 attacking the rook. The downside of queen d4 is one, now white will not have a two pawn center, so he'll not control the central squares as well, especially like the e5 square, right? And true, the queen will get attacked by like knight c6 soon. So I'm not so sure about this, but let's see. Wait, what? f6? Why not knight f6? Knight f6, and then if e5, then black can play knight c6, attacking the queen and the pawn. The queen will move, and then the knight can move. Let's say the queen moves. So if the queen just moves back, black just takes on e5 and is up a pawn. If white moves the queen, where does he even move a queen? Because like queen e3, there's like knight g4, double attack, right? Queen moves and we just take on e5. So it's not even clear where white should move the queen actually. Yeah, it's actually not so obvious. Yeah, so I think knight f6 and then knight c6, black is completely fine. And if white does not play e5, let's say he plays like knight f3, well, again, black can just play like knight c6. Let's say queen, I don't know, d3 to guard the pawn, and black can just play like, I don't know, bishop g7, followed by castling, maybe d6, activate this bishop. Black is completely fine, and white has just wasted couple moves with a queen, quite awkward. Instead of developing the bishop, instead of castling, the minor pieces are still of a first rank, so clearly now black actually has better development here. So yeah, knight f6 would have been the proper move. The rule of thumb is never push the f-pawn. The f7 and f2 for white and f7 for black is the Achilles heel for, in chess, is the Achilles heel, right? Is the weakest link. So usually you do not want to move that pawn. Why? Because, one, you cannot then put the knight there, but two, and more importantly, you weaken this whole complex of light squares, especially with c4j diagonal. And then eventually white can play like bishop c4 and prevent you from castling. So you weaken the f7 square, the knight cannot go to f6, and especially you weaken the c4j diagonal and you won't be able to castle. So never push the f-pawn, okay? f6 is not for the pawn, f6 is for the knight. But let's see. Knight f3, white just continues his normal development, makes sense. Knight c6, makes sense. Attacking the queen. Queen d3, now this looks kind of weird. Why would you put the queen on d3 and block your bishop, which is supposed to go to c4 and attack this diagonal, preventing black from castling? This I don't understand. So I think, so let's say you want to move a queen back, yeah, like at the very least, white could have just played queen d1, at the very least, okay? This would have been better than queen d3, that's for sure. And then bishop c4, and then maybe like castling, I don't know. And we have this great bishop on this long light diagonal. White has clear advantage, black cannot castle. Where do we put this knight? It's not even clear like what on h6 on the rim. Knight on the rim is a dim, right? So queen d1 at the very least. Maybe white had some more even active move. I don't know. Maybe like queen a4. You know, like if black plays like d6, then that would be like pinned, right? Also interesting. But like at the very least queen d1, right? So either queen a4 or queen d1 would have been fine. The main point is not to block this bishop. So queen d1, queen d3, I think is a mistake. But let's see, bishop g7. All right. Bishop, yeah. And so we put it on e2. So now ask yourself, where is the bishop more active? Here, where it's not doing anything, or on c4, where it's attacking this light diagonal and preventing black from castling. So yeah, this is definitely not good. I was also thinking about, now that white cannot play bishop c4 anyway, you see this pawn on g6, pawn hook? This is a pawn hook, meaning we can use it to open files. That's what a pawn hook is. We use his pawn to open files for our rook. So what about h4? And then h5, and then attack on the king side. And then, you know, if they play, well, if they take, then we'll just have a horrible pawn structure. We'll just take back with a rook, and we'll have an open h file. The h7 pawn will be weak, and the king will be open. If they do not take, then we will take on g6, they will take on g6, we'll take on h8, they'll take on h8, but then this g6 pawn will be weak, you know, and then we could even then eventually play like e5, right, open up a queen, and then take on g6, right? So h5, take on g6, take on g6, rook h8, bishop h8, and then e5, and just open up the game and attack g6, and the king is super weak. And if they play after h5, if they play, let's say, g5, that again weakens, let's say, let's just make some random move, let's play like this, this, well, this weakens the light squares, blocks the bishop, buries the bishop forever. This pawn is pretty strong, the h5 pawn, and like just, oh, the whole pawn structure is weird, the light squares are weak, yeah. Where is this knight going? So we might even maybe potentially like sack this pawn at some point, play h6, sack the pawn, but then open up the h file. We could castle queen side, right? We could eventually maybe put a knight on f5 somehow, maybe a d4 or somehow. There's also this potential of e5 pawn break, open up the queen, right? Open up this light diagonal. So it just looks bad, okay? It just looks bad because it's blocking the bishop. Weak light squares like f5, and especially, simply speaking, when black castles king side, he advanced too many pawns from his king too far away. Like imagine he just castles like eventually king side, but the king will be open. It's not good to push your pawns so much from your own king because the king will be too open. So that's the point, is the pawns are too far away, okay? So the king is too open. So it's just bad. And if black tries to stop it with like h5, then that again weakens the g6 pawn. Maybe white could even play like just e5, and then just attack the g6 pawn. It's very weak. Yeah, so I think h4 would have been pretty interesting. Other than that, yeah, bishop e2 looks kind of passive. I don't really like, I mean, it's not a mistake necessarily, but it's quite passive. There also might be this idea of bishop f4, with the idea of knight bd2, and then long castle, to attack on the king side. They would make whatever moves, we play knight bd2, long castle, and then again maybe try for h4, h5, maybe even some e5 potentially, right? Maybe like knight c4 and then like e5 striking the center. You know, if black plays e5, we can just like go back, but now this d5 square is weak, the d6 square is weak, the d7 pawn becomes backward, yeah? And so now we could play like again knight b2, long castle, knight c4, we are controlling d5, you know, d6, the knight can go to like d6, this bishop is stuck, this b3j diagonal again is weak, yeah? So we could prevent him from castling. We have again h4, h5. So it's not really that not so important that we lose a tempo. Like seemingly, oh, they attack our bishop, we lose a tempo. But that's actually not true. It's no big deal. It's actually much worse for black to play e5. Like the tempo is not important here, okay? So yeah, so bishop f4 I think would have been also interesting. But okay, bishop e2, alright, it's okay, but not the best I think. Queen c7. Oh, so now we cannot play bishop f4. Okay. Queen c7 does make some sense, although again the downside of this is they move the queen and not developing their minor pieces and castling. So this is not ideal. Usually in the opening, the number one priority is not to move a queen. So maybe he could have played some other move, I don't know, maybe like knight h6 or something, I don't know. To, you know, castle, then maybe then I can go to here, or to f7, or maybe he could have played d6, open up this bishop, something along these lines. Developing the minor pieces and castling, and not just developing the queen. That's not number one priority right now for black. So yeah, not so sure about this. But let's see. Castles, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. But again, more aggressive would have been h4. I mean like h5, right? Or what else? Maybe, yeah, bishop f4 now we cannot play. Maybe like, even like bishop e3 is interesting. Yeah, why not? Bishop e3, right? And then knight bd2, and then long castle again. So this I think would have been pretty good as well, actually. Yeah, I think bishop e3 or h4 more interesting. White decided to castle. White keeps it safe, right? Which is okay. Is also okay. Let's see, knight e5. This is very bad from black. Moving the same piece a couple times, yeah, like twice, and then right, instead of developing again, should we play like, I don't know, maybe like d6 or knight h6 again, and then knight g4, knight e5, right? Or knight f7, and then castling, something like that. But not moving the same piece twice. And now when we takes, and again he has to take, he has to react back, right? So he has to take back with the queen, and again he cannot develop. Again he wastes time. Just look at black's development. King in the center, moving the queen 10 times, queen in the center, rooks on the 8th rank still, I mean, which is okay, but minor pieces, bishop and knight on g8, this bishop is stuck, king on e8, it's horrible. So white has clear development advantage. So black violated all the opening principles in this game. So it's like a great guide how not to play in the opening. But let's see, f4, yeah, f4 is okay. Attacking the queen with tempo, and then eventually might want to play e5 or f5, right? Pawn break. Another move might have been, I don't know, just a normal move like bishop e3, activating the bishop, and then activating the knight. Then the knight can go to like c4, bring the rook to d1. This also would have been completely fine with big advantage for white. Or like immediately, you know, knight a3 or knight d2, and then like knight c4, attacking the queen, you know, also would have been good. But let's see, f4, queen c5 check. Not so sure about this check. Now white plays bishop e3 with tempo. I think black should have played like queen c7, but he's still much worse. A horrible development black has. But let's see, here, c6 is a weird square. Why not c7? I think c7 would have been more natural. c6 is just, we made potentially like attack it like bishop f3 e5 or stuff like that. So it just looks kind of weird. Bishop f3 white did play. Okay, d6, e5, queen d7, ed, alright, queen takes d6, queen takes d6. Now, yeah, this is still big advantage for white. Usually, when we have development advantage and our opponent has the king in the center, usually we do not want to trade the queens, because then our attacking potential diminishes, right? It dwindles away. Usually we want to keep the queens on the board to attack the king, right? Because the king is in the center, we usually try to go for the checkmate, for a big attack. So usually we try to keep the queens on the board. That being said, sometimes even in the endgame, if your development advantage is so great, you can exploit it even in the endgame because it's so great. Plus, in this specific case, black will have this weak pawn on d6, so they might lose it very quickly. So although we won't have a checkmate anymore, but we still have great development advantage. Black's pieces are very passive, and black has a very specific clear weakness on d6. Plus, there is now zero risk. Without the queens on the board, we have zero risk. So if you have something very concrete, it's okay to go into an endgame. Like, for example, here the d6 pawn is very concrete. Black's probably gonna lose that pawn, so it makes sense. But usually, if you don't have anything concrete, it's better to keep the pieces on the board, you know, and like avoid, especially the queens, and avoid the queen trade, okay? So another move here might have been just to avoid the queen trade, maybe some check, I don't know, maybe like queen b5 check or something, and then if bishop d7, we can just take on b7. And if the king moves somewhere, I don't know, here, well, then again, we could just like attack the queen, and then again, just develop a knight, and with attack. So this might have been another move, but queen d6, I think here should be okay, because this pawn is quite weak, so we can, you know, go and attack it immediately. Let's see, knight a3, I did play knight a3, threatening knight b5, attacking here, but also knight c4, and attacking d6. Let's see, knight e7, I mean, if a6, then we can just go like knight c4, attacking here, rook d1 coming, this coming, the king is weak, rooks are passive, everything is passive, everything is bad. Yeah, so knight c4, huge advantage would have been. But let's see, knight e7, knight b5 makes sense, triple attack, king d7, alright, yes, it makes sense. Rook d1, alright, again attacking the pawn, knight f5, bishop c1, it's okay, but it's a bit passive. White could have just pinned the knight. Oops. White could have just played like bishop g4, pin the knight, and now the threat is knight or rook d6, right? Probably knight d6 stronger. We just pin the knight. Even if like bishop f8, the knight again is still pinned. We could play like, I don't know, like bishop c5, maybe king c6 is interesting. So maybe not bishop, yeah, this is, maybe not bishop c5, but we could like just, let's say, take the knight, they take the pawn, they take, and then bishop c5, and now if king d6 we just take, and this should be advantage for white. Yeah, so there's this tactic. Yeah, so I think bishop g4 would have been fine, or if not bishop g4, if not, maybe like just like bishop c5, right, pinning the pawn, and when you like bishop f8, I think white can just play like g4, right, attacking the knight would move somewhere, and then we would just take on d6 with advantage. Yeah, but bishop c1 is kind of passive. So another rule of thumb is this: whenever it is your move, first thing, always look at a forcing stuff, move going forward. Your first reaction should be a move going forward. Like for example here, yes, we attacked our bishop, but your first reaction, the first thing you think about, should never be a normal move backward. It should be counter-attack, moving forward, you know, something crazy. If a move forward does not work, then the last thing you think about is a move backward. But in any situation, the first reaction, instinctually, the first move you look at should be a move forward. Okay, even though it like maybe it's more risky, maybe it doesn't work, but that's the first thing you should look at. And only in the case that it does not work, then you look at a move backward. Okay, so let's see, bishop c1, a6, attacking the knight. Knight d4, yeah, see now already knight d6 tactic does not work. Knight d4, yeah, I see this is not ideal now, because white had this attack, this like initiative, and now they trade too many pieces. This is not ideal. You don't want to trade too many pieces, because when your advantage wears off, right, your initiative wears off. So when you have an initiative, keep more pieces, keep more minor pieces. You need attacking resources. Okay, so don't exchange. Yeah, king c7, black played. I think black would have just like taken and like just traded immediately. I think would have been fine, but he decided to play king c7. Okay, rook e1. I mean, threatening. Oops, should take and then rook e7 check. This makes sense. Let's see, rook d8. Yeah, I think black. It's kind of weird, rook d8, but okay, I see his point. He wanna have like rook d7 against rook e7, so I see his point. But yeah, knight e6, good move. Yeah, take, stay. What? Oh, this was a mouse slip. Oh my god. Yeah, no, rook e6. White still should have an advantage because white has the two bishops, and the b7 is quite weak. The d6 pawn is quite weak. The king is quite exposed potentially, you know. There's like attacking the knight moves, and like rook e7 check. I think yeah, white should have an advantage here. Like I said, white has the power of two bishops, b7 weak, d6 weak. The king should protect like both, cannot really move because of b7. How do black play it? Probably like this. I mean, let's say, I don't know, rook e1. takes, maybe king e7, but then king e7, maybe we could just take, I guess, bishop b7. Now if takes, we just take, and we just won a pawn. And if rook b8, I think we can just play like this. Bishop d5, right? Should be okay, I think. Knight e7, c4, takes. Okay, maybe black has some compensation. But we don't necessarily need to take. We could just go like back, and again this pawn is attacked. And now if we go back to defend the pawn, we just go g4 and then like check, take, for example, right? There's also ideas like bishop g4, again threatening to take, and then rook e7. So then we'd have to play like this. But then again, we could play like bishop g4, pinning the knight, right? There's also bishop d5, centralizing the bishop, threatening bishop e6, again installing the bishop on e6, and then maybe again take, and like rook e7. We simply have a power of 2 bishops, right? So this bishop will ultimately activate somehow. Maybe we'll play like pawn c4, bishop here, or maybe once we get rid of this knight via g4, or like bishop g4, maybe like bishop e3, and then here maybe something like this. But yeah, white has clear advantage here. d6 weak pawn, passive rook, bad bishop, weak d5 square, but we could, like I said, potentially fix. We could play like c4, b3, by the way, bishop a3, and then like rook d1 as well. But like this b7 and d6 pawns are very weak. And the e6 square as well is weak, right? Like I said, there's bishop d5, bishop e6 ideas. The e file is weak for black. There's also potential for white to play for like h4, h5 eventually, right? Put pressure on these guys over here. So this is definitely yeah, quite a clear advantage for white, I would say, with zero risk. So I think white, yeah, should have won. But yeah, rook e5 obviously was a mouse slip, and I think, yeah, white just resigned. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the game analysis, and I'll see you in the next video.